Welcome to Better HR in 10 minutes, where we take a question important to human resources folks and discuss it from the perspective of an employment lawyer and an EEO trainer. I'm the employment lawyer. I'm Sarah Glasser.
And I'm the trainer, Rodney Klein.
Okay, keep in mind the things that Rodney and I talk about today are not legal advice. It's just two pals hanging out. Uh, so Rodney and I were talking about Title VII and religious protections, and he posed the question to me, what is religious expression? And oftentimes when someone poses a question to you, it's because they have a really good answer to that question. So Rodney, I'm going to pose the question back to you. How do you define the term religious expression when we're talking about the protections that Title VII sets out for folks related to their religion?
Yeah, it's a big topic, and I don't know that I have great answers, but I try to think of things in sort of practical ways. And in a practical sense, what I'd kind of suggest for employers is that they think of religious expression as that there's two kinds of religious expression. Because as employers, we deal with these sort of issues through a couple different lenses, right? We look at it through discrimination lens, and we also look at it through a reasonable accommodation lens. Now, if we look at it from the discrimination lens, what do we say? We say that as a general rule, employers can restrict religious expression to the same extent and degree that they restrict other forms of personal expression. Why? Because that's about consistency and that's about being equal, and that's all about discrimination. Okay, so Sarah, if you have an employee that comes to work one day and they bring into the office this like 5-foot crucifix and they put it in their workstation, and their workstation is in an area that you have restricted all personal expression because you just want the employer's message up there. You can go back to that employee and you can say, hey, I'm going to have to ask you to take the crucifix home because we don't allow forms of personal expression in this particular workspace. I mean, last week, we made Klein take home his signed Spurs Victor Wembanyama jersey, so we're going to ask you to take the crucifix home. And if that employee responds by saying something like, okay, I saw it at a store, I thought it looked great, and I wanted to bring it in, and I don't have a problem taking it home. Okay, that is one type of religious expression that's related to discrimination. On the other hand, if that employee comes back and says, but you don't understand, I have to have this next to me for the next month. Okay, now we're not talking about discrimination anymore. We're not talking about consistency. We're talking about the opposite of consistency. We're talking about reasonable accommodations. They've expressed a sincerely held religious belief, and that requires us to go through a different set of rules. So one type of expression is, this is what I believe. The other type of expression is, this is what I have to say, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to wear. Now, conceptually, that works. But on a practical setting, Sarah, what do you tell? Because what employers want to know is what do I say to this? How do I handle this? So how do
Yeah.
they handle this?
Okay, so great question, and it's worth pointing out that I don't get calls about this very often. I don't know if it comes up for you. I actually think that this would be like a prime conference question. Somebody sets up a wild hypothetical for you, and they want to know maybe the giant 5-foot crucifix is something else that's like very extravagant, and they want to know what they're supposed to. So this is a good conference question, anyways, but not something that folks call me about often. And I have some thoughts maybe on why that's the case, but what do you do if uh, you have someone who is just kind of generally expressing their religion, whether it is it's putting like a small tasteful quote on their wall, or having a crucifix on their desk, or keeping their Bible out on their desk, anything like those things that are sort of day-to-day expressions of religion. If that's what's going on, then as you said, if it's not a public space that you don't restrict other types of religious expression, then I don't see any reason that you would have to tell that person that they can't do that or that they can't engage in that type of expression. Uh, Now, let's take it a step further, Rodney. What do you do if the type of expression that the employee is engaging in is offensive to someone else? Say they're going around and what was the example we used earlier? Have a blessed day, or or saying things to their coworkers, which by the way they're allowed to do. They're allowed to talk to their coworkers about their religion, and they're allowed to share their religion. But what if they do it to an extent that someone has told them that they don't want them to do that anymore?
Well, if we're talking about this from the realm of a possible reasonable accommodation, because they say, look, I got to do this, right? This is
Yeah.
something that I have to do, then it raises the question, and it's a very legitimate question, is at what point in time does the expression change from something that's protected, which is, just general expression, to something that's not, like harassment? When does expression change to harassment? And, there's a lot of facets to that question. I would say, in my experience, it kind of comes into play twice. One is when that expression changes from a positive to a negative. So, in other words, I can say "yay" for my team, and no one should have a problem with that. And I understand that some people may get offended if they hear me say "yay" for my team, but that's not a real offense because everybody's allowed that expression. But if I change that to a negative, like your team's going to go to hell, okay, no, that's different, right? Because that's not a positive religious expression anymore. That's a negative one. So
Mm,
that could certainly put you on the front doorstep to a harassment claim based on religion, which of course would create an undue hardship or allow that person to keep making that expression. Or if the second part of that is if that expression is targeted and unwelcome. We get into the harassment standards now. In other words,
yeah.
I'm proselytizing you and
Yeah.
I say, you need to be on my team. And you say, I don't want to hear this anymore. And I keep it up, right? It's targeted and
Yeah.
it's directed at you. You stated it's unwelcome. Now we're starting to get into the place where I'm creating a hostile work environment for you. An employer can certainly step in on that
Hmm.
and say, we have to curtail that speech or that expression, or it's creating an undue hardship for us, which is kind of the legal side of it. Is that what you run across, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that that's right. And it brings us back in some extent to the almost golden rule, which is not the treat others how you want to be treated, but if somebody tells you to stop doing something, you should stop doing it.
Yeah, which doesn't really happen in our workplace today.
That's true.
Usually, when somebody says stop doing something, they go, "Oh, do it again."
Unfortunately, yes, and that's why we have jobs. So, thank you for joining us today. We hope that you found this to be helpful. Religion's a big topic. We have lots of thoughts on it, and we certainly didn't cover all of them, but we were glad to have this opportunity to share some of them with you. So, have a great day. We'll see you soon.